Good evening. My name is Vanessa Beasley, and I'm the Dean of the Martha Rivers Ingram Commons. It's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight to the 10th Annual Lawson Lecture. I'd particularly like to welcome a few very special guests. First of all, class of 2020, this is for you. We're so glad you're here. I'd also like to welcome the faculty and student viewceptors who've been your guides so far in our discussions of Strong Inside. And I'd also like to thank the university leadership that is here tonight, from our first-year leaders who were just elected as House presidents, for example, to our very upper-level leaders, the provost of the university and the chancellor, who I'll introduce in a moment. We've all read Strong Inside, and we've all been discussing it, and that's one of the reasons it gives me such a great pleasure to introduce you here, welcome you, here tonight. First, I'd like to talk for a moment about why we have the Lawson Lecture. The Reverend James M. Lawson Lecture is actually a Commons tradition. It honors distinguished university professor and theorist of nonviolence, Reverend James Lawson. This is the 10th annual Lawson Lecture, and we're especially pleased to be joined by guests for whom Reverend Lawson himself was an important leader, teacher, and inspiration for their personal journeys, and also in the journey of our nation. Reverend Lawson's own journey at Vanderbilt was one of challenge and adversity. Having enrolled as the second black student in the Divinity School, Lawson was a pioneer in his own right. His work as regional director for a civil rights organization known as the Fellowship of Reconciliation, in addition to his role leading the nonviolent protests in Nashville, led to his expulsion from the university. Years later, Vanderbilt would make amends with Reverend Lawson, though in the days following his expulsion, the campus was rocked with mixed emotions and great discord. It was only a few years later that Perry Wallace and Godfrey Dillard began their first year at Vanderbilt University. Tonight, 50 years after their arrival on our campus, we honor the work of Reverend Lawson, and we honor these two men for their roles in pushing Vanderbilt forward despite great personal cost. Now I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of housekeeping. I'd invite you to turn off your cell phones, or at least place them on silent, as I know you'll be very interested in every word that our speakers have tonight. I'd also request, with respect to our speakers, that there be no flash photography this evening. Thank you. It's now my honor to introduce a man who continues to push Vanderbilt to new heights. Chancellor Nicholas S. Zeppos was named Vanderbilt's 8th chancellor in March of 2008. A noted legal scholar, teacher, and executive, he has focused Vanderbilt on its core missions of teaching, research, and discovery. And he has personally recruited a significant number of our world-class faculty. Since 1987, Chancellor Zeppos has been an active contributor to the university, and in addition was one of the leaders of the planning process for the Martha Rivers Ingram Commons. He's also been a faculty viewceptor since the start of the Vanderbilt Visions program. Please join me in welcoming our leader, Chancellor Zeppos.
Thank you so much, and I want to welcome everybody to this wonderful event, the class of 2020, the phenomenal viewceptors, some of our faculty colleagues, and this is really an historic occasion for conversation and learning and teaching where history is literally being made. So I want to make sure that I thank Perry Wallace. I want to thank, of course, Godfrey Dillard and Andrew Maraniss for bringing this story to life, for actually, as a senior at Vanderbilt, writing a thesis on this, and then saying maybe something more could be made of this. And indeed, something more has been made. And it is an incredible story that will be told tonight, but in many, many, many other formats as we go forward. This is historic because we talk about reunion, and you will come back to many reunions, and you will come back for your 50th reunion. It's been 50 years since Godfrey Dillard and Perry Wallace were on this campus together. And they are reuniting tonight to talk and teach us about Vanderbilt and their lives. So I'm very proud to be part of this event, and let me tell you a little bit more about these remarkable individuals. As we say, two incredible stories and a remarkable storyteller. First, Perry Wallace, an amazing, bright, and gifted student. He grew up in Nashville, and he attended high school at Nashville's Pearl High School, where he was the valedictorian of his class. He was recruited by many colleges, north and south, east and west, and he enrolled and he chose to come to Vanderbilt to become an engineer, eventually a lawyer, but breaking the color barrier as the first African-American basketball player in the SEC. That role of pioneer and integrator of the SEC was truly groundbreaking, and along with this came incredible challenges for Perry as a teenager. Threats of violence when he traveled, hate, bigotry wherever he traveled, and oftentimes, whether he was traveling throughout our conference or he was walking on the campus, he always had to wonder, am I safe? Are there people who at all want me to be part of this? And to journey through that and do what any chancellor would ask, to lead an incredible life of achievement and success, but also transforming Vanderbilt and the American college sports landscape. On campus, it was not just basketball, it was civil rights, as you know. So he came in contact with Stokely Carmichael, Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Robert Kennedy. While at Vanderbilt, he realized that he was here for many things, and not just to play basketball. He became an active leader and an advocate for better treatment of African Americans on the campus. Upon graduation, he went up north to earn a law degree from Columbia University, and he served at the United States Department of Justice. Since 1993, he has been a professor of law at the American University, Washington College of Law, and he has a very distinguished teaching and writing career and is a visible expert on environmental law, corporate law, and finance. Now let me talk to his friend and partner, Godfrey Dillard. 1 week after Perry Wallace signed his scholarship papers, Coach Roy Skinner signed another African-American player, this time not from Nashville, but from Detroit, Michigan. An amazing individual, academically, athletically, an incredible personality, matching with Perry. Godfrey was a guard from the Visitation High School in Detroit, and he was all-state in football and basketball, and absolutely brilliant. He was heavily recruited from schools all around the country, but as Perry chose to stay in Nashville and make, nonetheless, a long, difficult journey to and through Vanderbilt, Godfrey came from Detroit to Nashville and to Vanderbilt. The two were roommates, and obviously their shared passion for ideas, basketball, and their circumstances, they became great friends. And Godfrey's experience was, in many ways, at a high level, as you know, similar to Perry's, but yet it was really quite different. For Godfrey and Perry, it was one challenge after another, one day of trying to be strong after the other. And Godfrey found that Vanderbilt, he might have been ready for Vanderbilt, and it'll be interesting to what he says. He's not sure that Vanderbilt was really ready for Godfrey. And so his experience was very, very different. Eventually, he was an incredible leader on campus. He pledged a fraternity at Fisk, making him the very first African-American Greek organization member on Vanderbilt's campus through Fisk. He also started the first black newspaper, and he encouraged Chancellor Hurd to hire more black faculty and increase the diversity and the black student enrollment on campus. He left Vanderbilt in his junior year, and he transferred to Eastern Michigan University. There, Godfrey graduated with a degree in philosophy, and then he went on to the University of Michigan to earn a law degree, and then he practiced law, but he went on to get a master's in international affairs from George Washington University, a long distinguished career in the law and policy circles. Finally, our moderator, Andrew Maraniss. Andrew studied history at Vanderbilt as a recipient of the Fred Russell Grantland Rice Sports Writing Scholarship. As an undergraduate, as I mentioned, he took up the task of writing about Perry's journey. In 1992, he earned the Alexander Award for Excellence in Journalism. Upon graduation, he spent 5 years working for no better place, Vanderbilt University Athletic Department, as Associate Director of Media Relations. Strong Inside is his very first book, and if he never writes another one, it almost doesn't matter after that piece of mastery. His awards include, for this book, the 2015 Lillian Smith Book Award, special recognition at the 215 Robert F. Kennedy Book Awards. Tonight, he serves as a moderator for the discussion of the lives these two extraordinary men live and have lived through the book he chronicles. Thank you so much, and welcome to our distinguished guests.
There you sit in the middle. You're in the far right. Hello, class of 2020. I'm Andrew Maraniss. This is probably Allison, my wife, is over here. Other than our wedding and the birth of our 2 children, this is the most proud moment of my life. I think this is probably also the most significant event that's ever taken place on the Vanderbilt campus. I may be biased, but to have Perry and Godfrey here together for the first time in 50 years, I hope that all of you appreciate the significance of this. It's not like Vanderbilt has read this book every year and you're just, the 10th or 12th class that's read it or has heard this story or has learned about what incredible, incredible men both Perry and Godfrey are. And I think, they graduated 50 years ago. I think you'll remember this night in 50 years. So I hope you'll soak it up. I hope when it's time for questions from the audience, you'll get right in line and ask questions. Don't be afraid. Take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm going to keep my remarks very brief. They're over. I'm going to ask Godfrey the first question.
Okay.
You got a raw deal from Vanderbilt many years ago. This is the first time that you've been invited back to campus in 50 years. What was going through your mind as you were on the flight from Detroit down to Nashville for this event? And what have you already noticed by meeting so many students and administrators on campus today?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that, Andrew, because as I was sitting on that plane flying into Nashville, and I looked out the window and I was looking to see how Nashville had changed, and I could see the tall buildings and the like. And I kind of, I thought about my dad, who was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, one of the original 100, who unfortunately died at the young age of 36 when I was only 4 years old. And I was thinking about my mother and grandmother who had raised me along with my other 4 siblings. And my thoughts were about what was I thinking when I flew in here 50 years ago? And I guess I had such great thoughts of hope and aspirations and visions of greatness, and I was just so excited by the idea that I was coming to Vanderbilt and I was going to play big-time basketball with Perry, and I just thought the world, this is it. This is fantastic. This is great. I'm going to be able to do something really significant. And, of course, it didn't turn out that way. But nevertheless, Vanderbilt played a very, very important role in my life. I had to overcome that adversity. But as I landed, I said, well, but this is not the same Nashville. This is not going to be the same Vanderbilt. And when I look out here at this crowd here tonight, I'm convinced that it's not the same Vanderbilt. When I went around the campus, it's not the same Vanderbilt. But at the same time, I'm sure that the challenges that you students are facing are the same challenges that America is facing today. We're facing income inequality. We're facing challenges in race. We're facing challenges in health care. We're facing challenges in gender equality. We're facing challenges in globalization. All of these challenges were present when Perry and I were here. And so in a lot of ways, you students are going to be faced with the decision of how you're going to respond to it. Are you going to be a part of the problem? Are you going to be a part of the problem? Or are you going to be a part of the solution? Are you going to add purpose to your life? To make this America a better America, make Vanderbilt America, make your family better. This is what is facing you. So I'm glad to be back here. I'm glad to be home again. I'm glad to be with friends again.
That's great, man. That's great.
I can't tell you how much it means to me that you are a part of this family.
Thank you.
And Perry, I've been asking you questions for 27 years. 1989 was the first time I called you. You were up in Baltimore. I interviewed you for a class paper. And I feel so fortunate that you've been my teacher, in a way, for more than half of my life. And I've always felt, in talking to you, that you have felt like your experience here, no matter how difficult it was, can be useful to other people, to teach people. And you're a teacher. He's still a teacher. He's not retired. He's a law professor at American University. And so thinking from your teacher's perspective, as these students read about your experience and Godfrey's experience in reading this book, what are you hoping that they will take away from that and learn from your experience to make this a better Vanderbilt, to make this a better country?
Yes. Well, thank you, and good evening. I'm so happy to be here. As you can tell, I wasn't going to let anything keep me from getting down here to be with you all tonight. Teaching and learning. In my family, education was so very, very important, and that's probably the reason that most of us became teachers or professors or whatever. We respected the power of education, of learning, of deciphering what W.E.B. Du Bois said it called in his work, The Souls of Black Folks, the Kabbalistic letters of the white man. The notion of becoming more enlightened, to be more powerful as a citizen, as a person who seeks to enjoy the blessings of liberty, and also as a citizen who seeks to help make her society a better one. And so in that sense, I found myself veering toward education and teaching because I had seen, on the one hand, as a little boy traveling with my parents up the country, as we used to call it, illiterate black people who were so helpless at the hands of society and its mechanisms, which could be just or unjust, but to take a piece of paper that perhaps had legal significance and to be so very, very afraid because they had no idea what was on that paper. And as a result, they had no idea to what extent they may have been compromising or enabling their body of rights. But how is this society structured? What are its various institutions? And how can I be sure that I know about those institutions, how they work, what can work in injustice? How can I create justice my own self? And education was one of the very, very important tools or instrumentalities for accomplishing this. So in that sense, I just found that moving into teaching provided me with an opportunity to go and, there's an old phrase, maybe your parents and grandparents used it, spill the beans. Spill the beans, but reveal the truth. Bring the light to make sure that people who might ordinarily be helpless and be compromised and be exploited, that those people might have a much greater chance at being empowered, at protecting their rights, and at making sure that this America works for them as promised. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay. Godfrey, you grew up in Detroit. You didn't have to come to the South and put up with all that you did, but you wanted to be a part of the civil rights movement. Can you talk about that motivation, what you were able to accomplish in the period that you were here? And then today you said something very interesting at the Black Cultural Center, that you felt like you had accomplished something, maybe that you hadn't even been aware of all these years in between.
Okay, I'll try to deal with that in parts. Well, you know, I grew up in Detroit, and at the time I grew up in Detroit, Detroit was, you know, the big Detroit. Motown was big, the auto industry was big. I was fortunate enough, my dad had an insurance policy when he passed away that allowed my mother and grandmother to take us into an integrated neighborhood. So I grew up in an integrated neighborhood, went to an integrated high school, and, you know, my mother encouraged us boys to play sports. So, you know, whatever we needed, football, basketball, baseball, hockey gloves, whatever, that's where she spent her money, and that's what we did. You know, I was an all-star athlete, football and basketball. And at the same time, I had a political side of my personality. I had a great, I'm a Catholic, I was taught by nuns, and I remember Sister Thomas Ellen. They say there's always that one educator that you remember in your life, and I always remember Sister Thomas Ellen because she was the first white person that really took an interest into me, and she encouraged me to run for student government as a freshman in high school, and I became freshman class president, and ultimately I became the first black class president my sophomore year, and then ultimately I became the student council president for the entire integrated high school that I went to. So I had an athletic side to me, and I had a political side to me. And of course, my identity was an athlete. I was an athlete. That was my central identity. But the civil rights movement was exploding at that time. You know, you had Martin Luther King, you had Rap Brown, you had Stokely Carmichael, you had the whole self-defense issue of violence versus nonviolence going on. And even though we were up in the North, we were watching what was going on in the South, the demonstrations, the hosing of black people and the like. And those of us up in the North, we didn't take a blind eye to that. We knew that racism existed in America, in the North, but it was a much more subtle, much more sophisticated type of racism. And of course, at that time, I said, you know, I've been recruited nationally, you know, Ivy League schools, Big Ten schools, but that summer of the Freedom Walks, the Freedom Rides of the summer, Mary Louiseau, the person from Michigan who had been killed down here during those demonstrations, I felt that That's where the action is. That's where the real challenges of America are happening, and I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to go into the South like some of the other young blacks that I knew of those times and try to change the South, try to make it a better South. And so when Vanderbilt called me, I was actually, Chancellor, I was actually embarrassed. I said, me? Godfrey Dillard from Detroit, Michigan? From this little Catholic school in Detroit? They're going to ask me to come down in the Deep South to integrate the SCC, the Southeast Conference? Wow. I said, wow. And I said to myself, I can't miss this opportunity. This is a chance for me to make history. This is a chance for me to make a difference. Something that I would be proud about my entire life. So my mother and grandmother, they went crazy. They said, no, you cannot go down there. No, no, no. But I was cocky, flamboyant, and everything else. And, women couldn't tell me nothing in those days, So I told my mom, I'm going. And so I came down here to Vanderbilt. And, of course, it was a big awakening. The Vanderbilt that I did not imagine the kind of, because I was basically colorblind, young folks. I was colorblind. I knew Arabs, I knew white folks, I knew Polish folks, I was Catholic, I lived with all kind of people. And I was colorblind, and they had welcomed me so much. They had made me class president. They cheered for me on the football field. They cheered for me on the basketball. So I like to say, I felt like I was Superman, And so I didn't think that I could not overcome the challenges of the South, Perry. I didn't think I could, I can do this. And of course, I was naive to that point. But the point of it is as I come back to Vanderbilt now, when I was at Vanderbilt, what I was about, young folks, let me tell you what I was about. I was about equality. I was about change. I was about non-discrimination. I was about eliminating poverty. I was about telling Vanderbilt that we want more black professors. We want black history courses. We want the black people who work in these subservient roles. We want them to be paid better. We want the women to be treated better. And so when we got together, the 8 or 9 of us, to form the Afro-American Society, that was what our platform was. And I happened to be the only northern guy, and somehow or another they drafted me, maybe because I talked too much, I don't know, that I became the Afro-American president of the organization. But the beauty of it for me coming back today, the beauty of it is, it was the sacrifice that I made, the pain that I suffered, the embarrassment that I suffered, the humiliation that I suffered. It was all worth it. Because when I look out here in this crowd tonight, and I see this kind of color, this kind of diversity, gender diversity, racial diversity, it's a beautiful thing. And so I realized that it was all worth it. And what you all need to do is that you need to continue to fight. It's not over. America's still on a journey. You're still on a journey. And like I said, you got to decide. Are you going to be a part of the problem, or are you going to be a part of the solution? And you have those beautiful skills, the academic skills, the social skills. Some of you come from diverse backgrounds, these great backgrounds. You've traveled the world. You're on cell phones. You're on, you've got all of these great technological tools, all these technological tools at your hands that you can make a difference. But when you get that first setback, when you're broken down that first time, don't view it as the end. View it as a chance to be reborn, to reevaluate who you are, what you're about, what your values are about, and then remake yourself into the image that you want to be. That's what I did. Vanderbilt destroyed my identity as an athlete, wiped it out. Everything that I wanted to be was an athlete. They wiped it out. Broke me down. And I went home with myself and with my beautiful mother and my grandmother and my values of education, hard work, discipline, perseverance. I rethought it. And I thought about who I was and who I wanted to be. And I had skills. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to be a lawyer. And I'm going to fight to make America right. And that's what I committed my life to. And ever since that, and as I said, I've gone on to be a lawyer. I've been a judge. I've been a diplomat for the United States of America. I've been before the United States Supreme Court. I've been a Democratic nominee from the state of Michigan for Secretary of State. But it all started here at Vanderbilt. It all started with me deciding that I was not going to allow them to destroy me. I was not going to allow that to happen. And looked inwardly and decided to make a difference. And each and every one of you are going to face that similar challenge in life where you are defeated. The question is, are you going to get up? Are you going to get up? And I think with the quality of students, Chancellor, you have here, I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to get up. Just like Perry and I. We got up off the ground and we made a difference.
All right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There it is. Wonderful.
Godfrey, you mentioned one of the things that you and your fellow students were doing were pushing for more African-American faculty and Black history classes. And I was curious if Dean Yolette Jones is here tonight. There she is. This is the professor that I had for my African-American history class. I was taking her class as a sophomore, and I was afraid when I walked up to her to say, "Can I write a paper about sports?" And I thought she would say, "This is Vanderbilt University. We don't write about sports here." And thankfully, she encouraged me to write my first paper about Perry and Godfrey, and look where we are now. So, Perry, I wanted to ask you a question. I saw John Lewis was quoted last week with the opening of the Smithsonian African American History Museum that the civil rights movement is really a story of strong African American women. And I wanted to ask you about the women who were influential in your life, particularly your mom. And then when you were a student here, you had a chance to meet Fannie Lou Hamer, and you've talked about how significant that meeting was for you.
Without question. First, I've been blessed to be from a family of strong women who are strong and smart and good and to have such strong values. And I want to say that what they do is recall or remind me of the strong Black women who have been all around in history in America, but I'm not sure that the world has been wise enough to make sure that that everybody knows about them. And even within our own African American community, we have not given Black women the proper credit, the proper. My thing is, respect, power, and money, among other things. If you really believe someone is equal and that they are your equal and that they should participate fully in society, give up some of that power, give up some of that respect, give it to them. And I think that what happens is that you have so much winning that occurs. It's such a wonderful, I don't like to use the word, I teach corporate law and finance, but when I talk about investment of the human nature, I'm talking about the way that investing in human beings is such a potent step. The return on those investments are huge, and the returns on investing in women are just huge investments if we would only give it a chance. But I was blessed to be from a family where the women were smart and strong, where they were good. I had my brother and my 4 older sisters who helped raise me. My parents were, I came along a little later. I was born, my parents were in their 40s, and so they really helped to raise me. I got a chance to get the benefit of having wise women who faced challenges and somehow found the strength to face them and get up every day and just to whip and beat them down until they were conquered. And so that was a wonderful experience. That followed on through to the woman that I fell in love with and married. That followed on through to the women I worked for early in my career, which was a powerfully beneficial experience for me as a person. These things have helped to make me so much better a man. And it helped me, be a lot better. Imperfect as can be, because this is a sexist society. It always has been, and it's terrible. And if you go around the world, once I started going around to Africa, Latin America, and places and seeing how little the world cares about women, then it really, really informed me and helped to give me a better sense of what our duties are. Just to be smart enough to make the investment in the people who really will probably help save this damn world from the kind of madness that does tend to pervade it. But just to wrap it up, I had a wonderful experience in meeting and getting the chance to talk to Fannie, the legendary Fannie Lou Hamer. And if you get a chance, I won't take our time tonight to tell you about her, but just read about her, and you will just be amazed, and you will be in awe at the courage, at the bravery that she displayed. And again, as I'm coming to a close here, I would say, Miss Hamer, I met her here at Vanderbilt at one of our programs where she had come to speak. And I knew her story separately, the Mississippi Freedom Delegation in the 1960s, and had a general idea who she was, but I didn't really know. And it just happened that at that program, for about 10 magical minutes, we had a one-on-one, and I got a chance to talk to her, and I had enough sense just to listen instead of just running my mouth, which I'm good, as you can tell, I'm good at doing. But she told me in more depth about what she had done and what she had endured. And she was, a small woman about, so tall. And I said, this is a nice lady who came to the program tonight. And the more that she told me, you won't believe this, but the taller she got to be, and I think she was ranging in about 7'2" by the time that we finished talking. This woman was a giant. This woman had shown so much strength and so much courage, and it was a great lesson for me. You see what the potential is, what the possibilities are. You have people, you give them sometimes just a little bit of freedom, just a little bit of equality, and see what they make of it. She was a wonderful example of this, and I think my life was just changed forever after that night.
Wonderful. Okay, so now it's your turn, students. We've got microphones in the back of the room there on the left and the right. If you'd like to ask a question to Mr. Wallace or Mr. Dillard, please line up behind those microphones and we'll just go left, right, left, right. All right, we'll start on the right since we've got a question over there first. Yes, sir, in the orange or red t-shirt.
Oh, yeah, so there's a lot of talk about either being part of the problem or the solution. So my first question is, do you think that everyone who's not part of the solution is inherently part of the problem?
Of course not. But the goal is to find a solution. The goal is to find a solution. So those who are striving to find a solution are, to me, the most important.
All right. And my second question is, like right now, the Black Lives Matter movement's really large. So I was wondering, like, what are your insights comparing and contrasting between now and the Civil Rights Movement? In addition, what do you think are the next steps that college students and the Black Lives Matter movement in general need to take in order to reach racial equality?
You answer me?
You see who was really the real leader back when we were at Vanderbilt. We always looked to Godfrey because he brought so much ideas, and he wasn't scared of anything, and we were. I was, anyway.
Well, you know, in a lot of ways, the Black Lives Movement reminds me a lot of the Civil Rights Movement in the sense that one of the central elements of problems of the Civil Rights Movement was police misconduct. Police were beating the civil rights folks who were trying to make America better. Today, we have a situation where the Black Lives Matter is saying to the public at large, we have some problems in our policing system, policing misconduct. One of the interesting things about that for me is when I talk to my conservative friends about this issue, the conservatives always talk about, accountability. They always talk about limited government. They always talk about transparency. And the police are the governmental entity that most interacts with everyday citizens. They interact with the everyday citizen more than any other governmental entity in America. And yet, there doesn't seem to be accountability. There doesn't seem to be transparency. There doesn't appear to be a requirement that they limit themselves and their interactions with people. Having said that, the key solution to it, I think, is that we must have better training of police. We must have better transparency of police. We have to have more accountability of police. We need to relook as a lawyer. I know that within the law, the police are given a pass when it comes to their misconduct. It's written into the law that they get the benefit of the doubt. And the police themselves have to start making their organizations more accountable. They have to look at themselves and say that, we need to make some changes internally ourselves. We need to report police misconduct when we see it. We don't need to fall behind the shield when we see police misconduct. I spoke with a sheriff the other day of the county, and I said, Sheriff, what do you think about this Tulsa situation? The man has got his hands up in the air, he's got his back to them, and they just shoot him down. And he said, and his response was, Godfrey, you're right. But the technology is now making that visible, and that's forcing us to now have to deal with it. Before, when we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the videos, we couldn't see it. He said it was very difficult for us that were within it to criticize our white compatriots who were involved in that, because we would lose our jobs, we would get kicked off the force, we would be demoted in the force. So, the Black Lives Matter to me is very similar for you that the Civil Rights Movement was for us. When we watched the Bull Connors beating civil rights workers, when we watched them putting dogs on the civil rights workers, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to join the protest, or are we going to stay out of the protest? Are we going to be a part of the problem, or are we going to be a part of the solution? So when you young folks are looking at these videos of black men being assassinated, you have to decide, what is your response going to be? On what side of history are you going to be on? That's a decision that each and every one of you must make, because you are seeing the videos. You are watching it. Just like I watched the civil rights movement in Perry, when we watched it, the dogs and the tear gassing. You're watching it now. And so you have to decide what is going to be your response. And let me tell you what your response has got to be. First of all, you need to decide who was right and who was wrong. That's the first decision. Who's right and who's wrong. And then you have to make sure that you hold these police officers in the future, because you're going to encounter them in the future too. They're going to stop you on the traffic stops. They're going to stop you. You're going to run into them in your clubs at night when you might have too much to drink and somebody wants to put you out. You're going to run into them. What you want, I think, is what I'll go back to what I think my conservatives have always said. You're going to want limited government, you're going to want accountability, and you're going to want transparency. And so if you believe in those principles, then you have an obligation to speak up for it, to support it. And if you do that, I think at some point our police organizations will get the message. They'll do better training. They'll recruit better people to be police officers. And therefore, we will really have a police force that is a part of the community, respectful of the community, loving of the community, and most important, respects each and every one of us as individuals with certain constitutional rights. And one of the most important of that is a right to life. You don't have a right to take my life for no reason.
If I'm allowed, can I have one more question?
A couple of quick follow-up points, if I could, on just the last piece. Finding solutions. There was the saying I remember from the 60s. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem, and you could play with that in any number of ways that you want to. I want to encourage you to consider whether or not the journey toward your fashioning your approach to solutions as a citizen, as a professional, as a leader, or whatever you're going to be. That's a personal journey, and I encourage you to feel very good and empowered about finding your own way and structuring your own approach to helping to contribute to solutions. Well, what does that mean? Well, sometimes it means that some people are willing to put their lives on the line. Some people are willing to make compromises or put themselves in jeopardy of not having a full career. It may have a lot of meanings, but I just think that the idea of being open-minded, being willing to search, to figure out who you are, and then to take that person, because that's the journey that you're on now. That's why you're here, and that's what you're going to be doing the rest of your life. But to figure out and tailor-make your approach to solutions. I say that, and again, some people often don't understand what it means, but people have all kinds of ways of crafting solutions. You could be living in a small town. There could be people who are different. They could be Muslim. They could be, Latino. And you decide to approach it approach getting to know them, approach getting more skilled, and I do say skilled, about getting along with people who are more diverse. But you should take an active role in that. You should have a lot to say about it, rather than that, well, here's the manual and I'll start with step 1 or step 2. The last point that I will make is that if you need to sneak around to do it, figure out how to get to be an objective, analytical person. Well, Professor Wallace, as my students often said, there you go again with some of that, strange thinking that you're talking about. What am I talking about? How many people can really put up with your actually engaging in an analysis of what happened at Ferguson, or what happened at Tulsa? Can you talk about Mike Brown at Ferguson? And if you bring in the idea of that video, and you're asking, well, what kind of guy was this, and what does that say, or do we have to exclude that? Is that legally impermissible evidence according to the law, and so on and so forth? But I guess what I'm saying is that there are a lot of these analyses that are forbidden, even by people who claim to be the most open-minded, liberals, conservatives, or whatever. I hope that you'll keep a little place, private space inside, where you are not afraid to do the analysis, no matter how unacceptable it might be to your cohorts, your fellow liberals, fellow conservatives, fellow Republicans, fellow Democrats. Because a whole lot of people, however much they claim that they care about freedom, they care about objectivity, that they claim that getting a liberal education at a university empowers them to think, they don't really think. What they do is react. They react. They may get mad if you don't say what they expect you to say. So if you've got a space within where you have made the attempt to develop the skill and the ability to look at a thing in an objective manner, that will make you a much, much more capable person in trying to search out solutions, especially if you are a leader, a manager, an administrator, or whatever. And again, I'll say it because there are those forbidden thoughts that are forbidden to whatever group you might be a part of, to really look at the analysis, to look at what happened down in Charlotte, to look at what happened in South Carolina, look at what happened in New York, what happened in Cleveland, and in Chicago, my goodness, various others. But to have some space where you can go, where you develop and refine your ability to think objectively, no matter what people might say if they actually heard what you were thinking. And as I tell my students, if that doesn't make any sense to you right now, I just ask you to remember it, and like maybe 5 years from now, if it starts making sense, or 10 years as you begin to live and think about what I'm saying, if it makes any sense, just send me a note, social media, email, and text me. I'd love to hear from you. You'd be surprised how many of my students actually do that. 5, 6, or 7 years later, a student will say, "Professor Wallace, you crazy fool, you were right." But
Yes, ma'am, you're next.
yes.
Hi, my name is Alexis Gordon. I was wondering, as students that came to Vanderbilt when it was first integrating, basically, and as people that have great background in law, how do you feel about recent Supreme Court cases and controversy about affirmative action in universities, and do you feel it's necessary, especially after your experiences?
Right down your alley.
Well, I was involved in the Gratz affirmative action case before the Supreme Court, and quite simply, the simple answer as to what those cases were about was whether or not people of color should participate in a university's mission, their educational mission. And, you know, the question is whether or not affirmative action was constitutionally permissible. And I'm very pleased about Fisher 2, because Fisher 2 held up the University of Texas's affirmative action program, a program that used the non-racial indicia for admission. In other words, they used the 10% rule, wherein which the top 10% of the various different high schools would be automatically admitted into the University of Texas. But even when they did that, they still were not able to have the significant number of people of color that they wanted in the school, and so therefore they still had to look at other means to do it. And of course, those two cases, the Grutter-Gratz case, was about whether or not universities, as a part of their determination of what their mission of education was about, whether they could use race as an important factor in that solution. And I think what happened in Fisher 2, at least Justice Kennedy, for the first time, you know, upheld this program, even though it used race in addition to the non-racial indicia for admission. Listen, these are state universities. These states are diversified states. They have people of all different colors, creeds, genders, geographic. The university should reflect the states in which they live, and they should reflect America, which means it should be inclusive. And even this is true for private schools. I don't think the private schools should get a pass either. Private schools, I think, should reflect America, and more importantly, reflect what America should be about in the future. So, as a person who's been involved in the affirmative action battle since the 80s, we've won. We've continued to win. The Supreme Court has never ruled that an affirmative action, racial affirmative action program is per se unconstitutional. And I say per se unconstitutional because that's what our opponents want to argue, that anytime you use race, it's per se unconstitutional, that it's reverse discrimination, that it discriminates against whites, or we're now hearing as to the Asian students, and the Asian students back when we did Grutter-Gratz were actually on our side because they made the argument, yeah, you know, we may get into school, but once we get into school, we're discriminated against just like you are. And it's my understanding now that the Asian students are taking a different approach. But I'm very pleased about what has happened in affirmative action. The Supreme Court has never ruled that affirmative actions techniques used by universities of higher education are unconstitutional. But more important, guess what? Just because you get in doesn't mean you graduate. Okay? Just because you get in doesn't mean you graduate. And so when you get in, you still have to perform. And I think the universities have taken the right position. We are choosing quality students. They have indicia of quality other than a standardized test score. They've shown perseverance. They've shown that they've overcome challenge. They've overcome adversity. They come from disadvantaged backgrounds. They come from poverty. Yet they have shown themselves to be special. They have certain unique qualities that we want in our university. We want our white students to intersect with these quality people of color, quality people of diversity, because that is the world. You white students cannot, the idea that you can live in a white world is over. It's over. You're going to have to deal with the globalization that as you go into the future, is astronomical when you combine it with the technological and electronic revolution that is going on today. And so therefore, you must accept diversity. You won't succeed if you don't accept diversity. You must embrace it. You must love it. That's what you must do. And the affirmative action battle brought that to the forefront, made it a discussion in America, and we're now seeing the fruition of it, of that battle, where we're seeing private schools and the universities finding ways to make their schools reflective of the world. And so I'm so, once again, when you fight that big battle, and at the time you feel like you're losing, but then as time passes and you reflect back on it and you say, damn, we won that. We won it. So I think we've won it. I don't take the argument that the Supreme Court, just because the Supreme Court might change, I don't think it's ever going to change. It's just like the right of women to control their own bodies, to control their own reproductivity. I don't think that's ever going to be changed. We've gone too far. And I think with affirmative action and creating universities that are diverse, look at the diversity in this place tonight. Look at it. Look around you. This wasn't what we came to, Paris. It was all white. Look at it. This is America here. So we're not going to go back. We've won it. And you all have the opportunity to benefit from it, but don't run from it. Here, you got to accept it. It's reality now.
Could I say a quick,
Sure.
very quick word? What I want to, I want to encourage you. I say this as as a lawyer, but a lawyer who's not thinking first as a lawyer, but thinking first as a person who appreciates that in society we really want to try to have harmony, fairness, and justice, and so on and so forth. Sometimes the law is an institution or a tool that can really do well in helping us to accomplish that. Other times it may not necessarily be. So I'm encouraging you to do something that's mischievous, that even outrageous, and that is to have a little place inside where you do your own thinking. And as you participate as students, as professionals, and in other capacities, when you go into firms, into banking firms, and go to work in hospitals and other places, that you have a self that looks at the organization and asks, what would make this, what kind of composition in terms of people would help make this a harmonious, unified place to be that's fair to the people who are in it, and what can I do to help facilitate that? Well, okay, Professor Wallace, what in the hell are you talking about? I have been on hiring committees and on admissions committees with students where one of the things that was important to me was to make sure that white males were not mistreated. I couldn't tell anybody. Because that's, wait a minute, aren't you Perry Wallace? Aren't you the guy who integrated you're not supposed to be thinking about stuff like that. And why should that be important? They got all the positions and all the jobs and so on and so forth. So the hell with them or the whatever. And I'm saying to myself, no, I don't think so. Now maybe this is just my view, but I think that within organizations that certain themes and certain values ought to be present, and I think that in all due respect to law and that sort of thing, and in all due respect to the real need to have greater diversity, that I think that it should not occur apart from some of these important other human and humane considerations. Now, the result in the instances that I've talked about is that I'm proud to have played a role in increasing diversity in all the institutions where I've been present, as a Justice Department litigator, as a law professor, as a partner in the law firms, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I have tried to bring to the picture, and in effect, I used what moral authority, gravitas, anything that you want, was I wanted to help people see that this stuff is all larger than just race and larger than just law. And as important as those things were, that there's a mix of values that needs to be brought to the picture. And if somebody is not there to try to help bring this to bear, then you'll have dysfunctional organizations. And I've seen organizations where some colleagues have pushed and created a great deal of dissension and disagreement and the like to get an artificial appearance of proper diversity. And the organization was basically dysfunctional, did not work well, people were not happy, and things fell apart. I think to have the courage and the bravery to think larger than just race, but to be able to take it very, very much into account, to think larger than just, law and the cases and the like. I think these things are important. And again, all I'm asking you to do is to just have a place, and in the old black culture and music, they had an old spiritual called steal away, but that you would steal away and do your own thinking, quite apart from whether or not it would make people disappointed in you, angry with you, or whatever, but that you would first do that and then come back to the picture and deal with any organizational imperatives, the diversity and the like. So just thinking for yourself, the fundamental reason that you came here to Vanderbilt, I'm encouraging you, yes, please do that, and don't let anybody take that away from you. So again, you'll hear me talk about sneaking around and being objective, sneaking around and being analytical, because not everybody can really accept that you do that.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
feel
Our time for this part of the conversation has come to a close, but I want to do two things before we depart. The first is I want to thank the gentlemen that are on the stage in front of us tonight. I want to thank Andrew Maraniss for asking the questions to Dr. Jones in that class. I want to thank Mr. Maraniss for continuing to ask those questions over 25 years later to bring us to this point tonight, not only for the presentation, but also for our own self-reflection. Thank you, Andrew, for asking the questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank Mr. Dillard for coming back. Thank you for coming back. Thank you, Mr. Dillard, for coming back to ask us questions about whether we want to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Wallace. Thank you for your legacy, your example, and also the questions you posed to us tonight. Not just whether or not we can be strong inside to steal away and think for ourselves, but also, as you put it so beautifully in your first comments, how can we create justice within our own selves? How can we bring the light? Thank you, Mr. Wallace. I'd also like to thank the family and friends of Mr. Dillard and Mr. Wallace who are here with us tonight. It's quite a large group. Thank you. And of course, you know I have to do this, class of 2020. I want to give you a challenge. I not only want to ask you to think about how you would answer the questions that have been posed to you tonight, but I want you to think about something larger. I want you to think about how they're going to write your story 50 years from now. Where are you going to be in that index, is a conversation many of us have been having. And most importantly, I want you to think about this. How are you going to be worthy of the examples of these gentlemen and the pioneers who were with them, the people who came before you? I know you can be worthy of that, but you have to answer that question for yourself. How are you going to show that you're worthy? To continue the conversation on a more personal level, if you brought your book, we have been told that our guests are willing to stay in the lobby for longer and have conversations with you as they sign copies of your book. So if you want to have a conversation with them, it'll need to be brief because we're keeping them quite late this evening, but I would invite you to retire to the lobby and start to form a line where you can see them in just a few minutes. Again, thank you for being our very special guest tonight. Thank you for being here, and have a safe trip home.